ableism? Ableism is the understanding and the building of our environment, whether we are talking virtual or built environments, whether we're talking how we engage with one another, from the understanding and standpoint of able-bodiedness and abled ability. So when we're talking about ability and ableism, we're basically assuming that everyone can move through the world in the same way, cognitively approaches the world in the same way, and that there is one approach to engaging in social and work environments. Ableism is hard to talk about because it is our default. Ableism is in every structure and it is in every process. And if we look around ourselves in buildings and environments, it is how the world has been approached.
I mean, the question of what it means to have a disability is a pretty contested question, all right? And who you ask you're going to get a lot of different answers. And so part of the history of disability rights and disability studies has been fighting over our right to have a say in defining what that word even means, right? My answer is that disability is a social and political category of difference, which is, I guess, another way of saying that disability is a political category used to sort forms of embodied variation and embodied difference into categories that we can make sense of and understand.
So when we talk about a disability as a concept, you'll realize that in the society, in the community where we live, already people have the mindset that if you have a disability, then you are not happy. You're not living a happy life. Or if you have a disability, then you need to go through some kind of healing. If you have a disability, then you are not just like everyone else. So because of those kind of social constructs that already exist in our communities, you'll realize that it's almost obvious or automatic that when somebody sees somebody either on a wheelchair or somebody walking with a side stick or using braille or a deaf, then they already have some kind of a limitation that's attached to their abilities, which is not actually the case.
What is interesting about disability is it is one of those identity markers and markers of experience and self-identification that many throughout the course of their lives will experience at some point or another. We all age, and aging bodies can become disabled bodies. We all are at any time of the day, at any moment, able to experience accidents that may change our lives forever. It is therefore why we speak extensively about universal design in process, in procedure, and in buildings. Universal design is approaching all things, really, from the understanding that everyone should be able to access, that everyone should be able to experience whatever it is we're talking about, whether we're talking about a document, whether we're talking about a meeting, whether we're talking about a syllabus, or whether we're talking about a policy and procedure or a computer program. That we should begin from the understanding that everyone, regardless of experience, self-identification, disability, or need for access, not everyone who has accessibility needs identifies as disabled, can experience and have be afforded the same opportunities as anyone else.
If you are in a research team, I think you also need to represent this particular kind of bodies within your research team. So that brings in the human resource aspect of things. And as a researcher, I think one important thing that's really critical is when you're recruiting participants in your research work, you need to be intentional. So intentionality is very key. So you can be intentional when it comes to the human resource, but then also when it comes to representing the voices of people living with disability. You need to be able to ensure that you intentionally recruit these individuals so that the voices of people living with disability are also represented within your data. And these voices need to be really, really projected. You need to ensure that you present those ideas. Let them not be silenced within the data that you have.
If something is planned without expecting disability to show up, then disability is always going to be this unexpected surprise that you're always trying to have to deal with as like only in the mode of it being a problem. Whereas if you are actually expecting it and expecting it to show up in your classroom, in your research, as it should, because it's an everyday part of our lives, well, then you can build ways in which disability can show up in a generative way.
Researchers often don't know where to start. And that is probably one of the most important learnings that a researcher has to begin with, is saying, you know what, for the first time in my academic career, I don't know what I'm doing. I may be an expert in this field, this subject matter, this question, but I actually don't know what I'm doing. That is a scary feeling. And in order to really do better and learn how to transform research practices when it comes to ableism and ableist structures and approaches, the researcher has to be willing to recognize that fact and seek advice. That is really the first starting point. And that is what any good researcher does. But sometimes it feels uncomfortable to be out of one's depth. But that place of discomfort, as we like to say, is a good place to be in. It's a good place to start, because that is where deep transformation happens.